Rocket League esports is facing its biggest crisis ever, and the orgs are begging the developer to do something about it. The 2024 World Champions won't field a roster to start next season. Longtime supporters of the game are forced to bail, even as they say they want to somehow make this work. And others are cautiously holding out for some kind of change that will make this all worth it. Over the past few months, we've seen orgs speak more candidly than ever about the problems facing Rocket League esports. But is it already too late?
I would say it's probably because it's the off season and there's nothing going on in the off season. And RL Esports and Epic Games created an ecosystem where it's not worth it to own teams in the offseason, which is why you've seen probably 7 orgs at this point already leave, if I were to take a guess. Giving up makes more sense because you can't make a career out of Rocket League Esports. It's so hard right now.
Hey guys, today's episode of Don't At Me is sponsored by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians, these are things people would likely say about drivers who switch their insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com today to see if you could save. Okay, now let's get back into today's story.
Some of the most storied organizations in the game are thinking about leaving Rocket League, and some have already left. So where do we start talking about this whole thing? Let's quickly look back to 2016 when Rocket League was well positioned to harness this rising tide of venture capital that was rushing into esports as a whole. There were lots of upsides to the game for investors. The basic formula of car soccer made instinctive sense to a wide audience. That same formula didn't involve realistic violence, suggestive content, or difficult themes like terrorism, and rosters were small at 3 players. The players and audience for the game also seemed to skew younger, making the fan demographic potentially even more interesting to advertisers than some competitors. But as VC money flocked to the game, we got the same result in Rocket League that we got everywhere else. Player salaries went up quickly. As explained by commentator and content creator Lawler a few weeks ago, an initial bidding war between Cloud9 and the newly funded NRG for the Kings of Urban roster in late 2016 helped to kick off a salary arms race.
And ever since that moment, there is a certain entitlement or a certain justification that players think because their buddies are making that kind of money that they also need to make that money. And that just kept stacking up. And then organizations come in and go, hey, these kids are asking for 12, 15 a month and they're the best and they've got the biggest notoriety. We're going to do it. They come in, they can't sustain it, and then they back out. And the market stays inflated. And the ones suffering are the ones that have been trying to support it for long term. The G2s, the space stations, the people who've been around for a really long time since the beginning, that have their hearts in the right place, that are trying to do things the right way.
Now, to be clear, I think most people, including Lawler, want players to be paid as well as possible, and he says as much in his video. And it's also not realistic or expected for players to try to figure out what's sustainable and what isn't, because without them, there's no esport. In short, just like every other esport, we can't expect players to turn down the bag, but we also need to acknowledge that these rising salary costs are part of the problem that's currently facing Rocket League esports.
I don't think that necessarily players and agents have always had the organization's best interests at heart when they, or not best interests, because obviously they've got the players' best interests at heart. I don't think they've necessarily always balanced what their value is correctly to what they offer to the organization. From a player perspective, of course, they're always going to want the best salary. That's obvious. But I think also players have to think about what they're actually doing for that salary, because just playing Rocket League is not going to be enough.
Now fast forward to 2024, where some orgs are saying that their ability to make those salaries back hasn't improved very much, and some are even saying that over the past year, it's gotten worse. It's a stark contrast from 2022, when the World Championship success stoked interest in the game, and the esports possible inclusion in Tier 1 seemed imminent. So one part of this puzzle is the revenue sharing on shop items. Resolve COO Jeff Simpkins posted a thread back in August about the disparity in sales from shop items with revenue sharing, and it's grim. This is one of the primary ways orgs can make money through the game itself, by designing and then selling in-game branded esports items, where a portion of the revenue is shared with the org. Simpkins pointed to fewer items per team, reduced season length, and difficulties translating submitted designs faithfully to the game as factors that affect all teams.
The design that we submitted was not what ended up on the car. The colors were completely different. The design was wrong in certain places. Yeah, it just wasn't good. Our car in game, in the politest possible way, like it just doesn't. It's just not. That isn't what we created, and it doesn't do justice to Aspect, who created it.
He also noted that his own team's performance in Split 1 and the designs themselves were likely also part of the puzzle in their specific case. I should also add that these esports items are not mandatory for pro players representing their teams in official games, which could potentially limit their appeal to fans. Team skins have long been a thing in the Activision Blizzard world, for example, and are forced on for teams competing in the Call of Duty League or formerly in the Overwatch League. Players may be hesitant to switch up their setup in Rocket League, which makes total sense, but I wonder if we couldn't just try to cosmetically change the things for the broadcast so that they can drive interest in these items. And the general value and attractiveness of Rocket League items was also impacted when, in late 2023, the ability to trade them was completely removed from the game. But it's also way deeper than that. Simpkins posted that nearly half of his team's RLCS expenditure was on, you guessed it, salaries. That brings us to the next point. Some orgs are starting to speak publicly about the fact that making the numbers work in Tier 1 Rocket League is difficult, if not impossible.
The last couple of seasons, decisions have been made that progressively have made it much harder for esports orgs in Rocket League, in Rocket League esports. And I think it's just kind of coming to a head.
Names like TSM and OG seem to have a very uncertain future in the game, whereas BDS and G2 are struggling, but seem to want to continue to support Rocket League esports. So who has already left? Well, just recently, it's starting to look like more of a bloodbath. On October 2nd, OG announced that they would depart Rocket League. This was NA's 4th ranked team heading into the World Championship. And sure, it's not like they won it all, but any functional league needs to help teams at all ranks survive. A few days after that, Achilles XF of Shift reported that BDS, the team that won the World Championship this year, would not field a team to start the 2025 season, although they hope to be back soon. BDS responded less than a week later, with confirmation that they had to review their position and investment in Rocket League esports. The same day, Alex Gonzalez of Luminosity Gaming, which left Rocket League esports back in June, chimed in. He noted that the troubles now facing the scene required more than just revenue sharing tweaks, and were far more baked into the system. And it got even worse. G2's CEO confirmed that rumors about the org's potential non-participation were true, and that the support they get covers about 20% of the cost of running a Tier 1 org. Now, they did say they would continue to search for a partner for the team. More on that in a moment. But let's be real, G2 are an institution in Rocket League. They've had a team since 2016, won numerous splits, and made second place at the World Championships a couple times too. They are the kind of team that Psyonix should desperately want to retain, and their departure from Rocket League would be a massive moment for the esport, and also likely an indictment of the way this whole thing is being handled. Another name that's cropped up is Team Solo Mid. While they didn't outright say that they were out, they noted that they can't commit until we have a better understanding of the 2025 esports and monetization structure. Finally, back in September, Gen.G's CEO noted that while they are staying in Rocket League, they are looking at all their options. Then, after G2's statement, he commended them for their openness in speaking about the difficulties teams are facing, while reiterating that these teams are still here because they believe so strongly in Rocket League. There's one more take that I think is pretty interesting that I want to mention, but it's not from this year. Team Liquid actually left Rocket League at the end of 2023, but at that time, they posted an in-depth article explaining their viewpoint and how they viewed Rocket League esports as an overall structure. Let's be clear first, this isn't an angry org that's cruelly sniping at a scene that they've left behind. Their post says that they want to return, and if you actually read the whole thing and look at all the work they put into it, I really do believe them. They first concede that they might have stayed if they could have signed a stronger roster, but then argue that this dynamic is part of the problem. The esport, to their telling, is win or bust, and there isn't enough sponsorship revenue to let an org hang around and try to build something. On top of that, further changes to the competitive format this year, changes which Liquid obviously wasn't around to experience, may have also impacted org stability. So what can we do? What solutions are available to us if, as has already been mentioned, a slight tweak to revenue sharing will not be enough to reverse this thing?
But like, I do feel bad for the orgs. I feel bad for the orgs because it makes me feel bad for the like players. Because if the orgs don't want to be in, then the players just get f***ed. Because if the orgs don't want to be here, the players won't get paid. And then the players can't sustain this, and then the players can't play.
Well, they could try to expand the ways that orgs make money. Recall that back in 2019, Epic Games bought Psyonix. Fortnite uses creator codes, they were eventually added to Rocket League, but there's currently no option to use them to support orgs themselves. They could also try to provide more baseline support from the developer to all the orgs. After all, as we just mentioned, Epic Games owns Psyonix. Again though, amounts here are key, and everything we've seen from orgs speaking out publicly about these things seems to suggest that, you know, ticking it up a couple of percentage points isn't going to instantly solve this problem.
All the orgs that I've spoken to, even if they've got a team this season, some organizations that I've spoken to have basically said they're either not coming back for this season or this might be their last season. So even some of the teams that have got some of the orgs that have got teams now are saying that this might be their last season. So I think it's obviously not in a good place for orgs, for sustainability, and definitely for profitability. You know, unless something changes, that's not going to get any better for teams, and in turn it will get worse for players as well, because there's going to be a lot less orgs this coming season, I would suggest, and you know, players just aren't going to be able to make a living off Rocket League as it stands.
Unfortunately, it seems as though next season will restrict rather than expand the ways orgs can make money. Many teams have big sponsors who want their name on the team's esports decal, but according to reporting from Achilles, that won't be allowed in 2025. This will make attracting those sponsors even harder, which is a direct hit to orgs. And maybe there need to be some structural changes even beyond that. In his video, Lawler pointed out that the combination of player ownership of the slot plus constant roster churn makes it difficult for orgs to get invested.
It's like you want to be invested in this, but they don't have the control to justify being invested. And because of that, rosters change at the flip of a hat. It's very tough for organizations to really invest long-term and build these narratives and these storylines when every 3 months it's changing. And then 6 months after, it's a completely different team. Like, how do I, as a fan, invest in a team or an organization when the team and the organization is different every single split every single year?
Listen, the ownership of the slot gives players a lot of control over their situation, and generally, I'm in favor of that because they make the esport possible, and I honestly don't care about the exact ROI that some celebrity investor gets on a Rocket League team. But there's got to be some stability if you want to keep investors happy. Now let's talk about the league format itself, and honestly, it's not perfect either. In 2024, there's essentially over 3 months of off-season break at the end of the year. It's a lot. There are some smaller events planned before 2025, but some of these aren't events a pro team would attend, which means it's not necessarily improving how an investment in the esport looks for an org. They're probably still good for fans, and maybe for the ecosystem as a whole, but at the very least, orgs have much more limited opportunities during the break.
It's just so long. If you don't make majors and you don't make worlds, the off season is just ridiculously long. It's not even that it's just a 3-month off season. For some teams, it's horrifically long. You know, those players that were with us haven't been paid now, you know, because for organizations like ourselves, we aren't big enough to be able to support players all through that really long off season, especially with so few events.
Now, this past year was the first year of Blast running the RLCS, and it looks like there are even more changes to come next year. When they were announced in September, I think they were generally seen as positive by many people. These include a somewhat bigger prize pool for 2025 to the tune of $5 million, and also the addition of a 1v1 circuit, which, while it's likely to be fairly small, could still be pretty fun. And it expands the World Championship to 20 teams while making sure that the top 8 teams at majors don't have to constantly play open stages. That makes total sense to me. There could be more things unannounced, and who knows exactly how the 2025 off season will be handled. But again, while these are interesting and exciting for fans, it's not clear to me that any of these things are really changing the temperature for orgs looking to invest.
G2 were already saying that, Team Liquid already left, Gen G are talking about it, whether they come back next season or not, and I spoke to numerous orgs in private that are debating not coming back. So I don't know what the wake-up call is. Maybe we really have to hit rock bottom. Viewership has to tank. The big orgs have to pull out for them to finally go, oh, this is not good.
When recently contacted by Esports Insider about sustainability, Psyonix pointed to the announced changes and to potential future announcements. But it seems like some orgs like T1 have potentially already seen those changes, and it wasn't encouraging enough. To me, that's not surprising because it seems like there's still a conversation that needs to happen between the developers and the orgs about what exactly could change here to make this more attractive. Epic Games has the ingredients that Rocket League esports needs to succeed. They've got a compelling game, passionate fans, and orgs that really believe in this competitive scene beyond just trying to get some quick payday. But they also have serious problems, most notably the inability of many orgs outside the top tier teams to make this into a functional business. And if that isn't resolved, it won't just be orgs that suffer, fans will too. Really, the question will be whether or not they can agree on how to make this thing work going forward. And if they can't, well, it won't be the first time that a massive company with tons of cash and reach failed to understand and execute on their own game's esport.
Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, hit the sub button and ring that notification bell. For unique bite-sized videos you won't find anywhere else, hit up our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pages.